Today's shiur begins a little more than halfway down our daf, 19 lines from the top. We continue with explanations of the Mishnah. We had featured different powers or rights that a father has with regard to his daughter. And here we have a qualification of that. V'eino oichel peros b'chayeha. If a woman or a girl, of course we're talking about young women, young girls in the home of their father up till age 12 and a half, a ktana and a nara, if they happen to have inherited land from, let us say, a maternal grandfather, the girl's father has no rights to consume the fruit, the produce of that land. What happens, in fact, is the produce is sold, and some item that has longevity to it and value, and I would assume hoped increased value even, is purchased for the girl that she can benefit from later when she reaches adulthood. Tonu Rabbanan. Before we begin the actual text, let us glance at the side. We have a nosei, a topic heading, which reads Machloikes Tanoim. We have a Tanaic controversy. Im Gam Ho'av Zakai Le'echol Peros. Does in fact a father have a right to consume the fruits? The Mishnah took a stand, but we'll see additional opinions on that. And when we speak about the peros of the fruits of the daughter, it's nichsei bito shenoflu lo mitzad imo. It's the fruits, the benefit of property that she inherited from her mother's side of the family. We use the example, a maternal grandfather bequeathed property to his daughter's daughter, to his granddaughter. The Gemara, ha'ov eino ochel peros b'chai bito. Then this is the opinion we saw in our Mishnah, that the father does not consume the profits from property that his daughter received. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer ha'av ochel peros b'chaye bito. The father is entitled to the profits from the property that she received. B'mai komifli. What's the underlying point of controversy? Tanakama sovar bishlamo baal tokinu le rabbanan peri. I understand, says the Tanakama, that a husband has a right to eat the fruits from properties that a wife brings into a marriage. The imkain, if the husband would not be allowed to consume the fruits, mimna velo porek. He, in the event that his wife is taken captive, would have no incentive to redeem her. The husband would figure that, well, she has profits from her properties. Let those profits that I can't benefit from go toward redeeming her. Eloav mai iko lemeimar. What are you going to say about a father? Demimna velo porek, that a father wouldn't redeem his captive daughter. Belavochi porek lo. Even without the father benefiting from the fruits, the father will redeem his captive daughter. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Savar, and here we have an opinion that is quite interesting. He holds Av Nami Mimna Velo Porek. A father also isn't going to be so quick to redeem his captive daughter if she has her own funds. Savar, he'll figure, Kisa Nikita Iluya. Kisa is a pouch, like a wallet. It's figurative reference to money. She has her own money full of her own pouch full of money, or she has whatever was purchased for her, as the Tanakama would have suggested. Tezel v'tifrok nafsha, let her go and redeem herself. Now, the main point I don't think you can see in the words. Let us take a look at Rashi, who completes the picture. Kisa Nikita, Rashi a little more than halfway down the Rashi column. He says, Kismo lemos yesh lo b'sgula. She has a pouch full of money that's been set aside for, and skula is the that which is purchased, or the cash that's set aside which has longevity, the cash that was received for the sale of the fruits. So she has that. V'ad heino lo nehene simem. Until now, I, the father, haven't benefited from it. According to this is of course Rabbi Yossi Yehuda speaking in terms of the Tanna Kama's approach. Well, Ata now tiftes atzmo, let her redeem herself. V'im yechsar ani lo ashlim, and if the amount that she's accrued in her in those profits isn't sufficient for her redemption from captivity, well, I'm not going to make up the difference. So Rabbi Yossi Yehuda is concerned that if the father does not get the benefit of those profits from the properties, the father likewise is not going to be so interested in redeeming his own daughter. And we elaborated a little bit toward the end of our previous show. I don't want to do it again, but the insight of the Shas. In our previous discussion, we spoke about the father's rights to items that his daughter finds, and the Gemara at the top of this Omid pointed out that the reason the father is entitled to that is Mishum Eva, and there we had spoken about the father is supporting his daughter, which he doesn't have to do by letter of the law, and if he won't receive her found items, if she finds some money in the street, if she doesn't give that to her father, that's going to develop Eva. Ill feelings, strain, contention between father and daughter, even though it's his own daughter. Whereas the Tanna Kama had this seeming, we'll call this kind of a innocent sounding approach that of course a father will redeem his daughter. Rabbi Yossi Yehuda says, well, when it comes to money, money might be something that is we'll say dearer to a person than anything else in his life, including his own flesh and blood, his own children. Take that into consideration, says Rabbi Yossi Yehuda over here. And in fact, this theme you'll find throughout the Chazal. And I know we said this in our last year. I really didn't intend to dwell on it too much, but you think about it in life. How significant money is to so many people, that even though we encourage people to rise above that, to become more spiritual, to what they say, do with less, but nevertheless the shas, and this is the singular greatness of the Talmud, how it dives into the inner essence, the inner being of a person, like I would say no other work does. And imagine we're dealing with the basis of all of Judaism, the basis of truth, the basis of spirituality, and here we are recognizing this sort of inner makeup of a human being, and hence when it comes to money matters, and when it comes to someone else's money, one has to treat it very seriously, not to treat it lightly, and respect and everything else that goes along with that. And that's the message that I believe is being communicated in comments like this, that as we saw in the Gemara and the Rashi, that as Rashi said, if I don't have a right to the profits from her field, well, she's got her own money, and he's talking about his daughter, and in the context of this Gemara, we're talking about a young girl, and yet the father will say she's got her own funds, and if that's not enough to cover her redemption, and I can't benefit from her property, so let her rot away in captivity. Sounds a little harsh, maybe, but do think about it. Let us continue in the Gemara. Nises Yeser Olov Habal Shu Ochel Peros. We're dealing with the opinion, of course, of Mishnah that said the father is not entitled to the profits from properties that his daughter may have inherited. A husband, on the other hand, does have the right to consume the profits from fields, for properties that a wife brings into a marriage. On the side of the Gemara, we have a topic heading Gvias Toisefes Ksubok Var Mino Erisin. The collection, the right to collect the additional amounts that are written into a ksuba. Additional amounts means your basic ksuba provides for a woman to receive either 100 or 200 zuz upon the dissolution of the marriage. In one Mosaimona for a woman that was a widow and now remarried, or a sum of 200 zuz for a virgin who had, she's a virgin and never had been married. She would receive 200 zuz. What about extra monies, extra properties that are written into the ksuba? From what point would a woman be entitled to receive that? Technically speaking, the marriage, as we've spoken many times, is essentially a two-stage process. There's erusin, and then it could be several months later, it could be even up to a year later. Then there is the nisuin. Nowadays, we don't really see that because our practice is that the erusin and nisuin take place at the same time under the marriage canopy, as is familiar to many of you from being at weddings. The Gemara now is going to be interested in what about the ability to collect from the early stage, from the erusin stage, if the marriage comes to an end. Basically, and we've seen this before, that the ksuba generally is written prior to the nisuin. What happens if it's written out at much earlier? So now the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, Kosav law, Peros, Ksus, V'kelim, She Yavo Imo Mibeis Aviha Lebeis Baila. The father writes over to his daughter. He assigns to his daughter in written form, in writing, as part of her dowry, peros, fruit, ksus, garments, kalim, other vessels that she will be bringing from her father's house to her husband. And it's written in from the erusin, as the Rashi points out. These are different kinds of portables that the father wants to give to his daughter that she'll bring into her husband's house, and it's written, as Rashi says, Kosvan lo min erusin. He assigns it from the point that she enters the first stage of marriage. Mesa, and then she dies. The daughter dies. In other words, so the bride dies. Lo zocha habal bidvarim halalu. The husband is not entitled to these items. Mishum Rabbi Nosson Amru, in the name of Rabbi Nosson, it was said, Zocha habal bidvarim halalu. The husband is entitled to these things. So now we have to analyze this machlokes. The structure that accompanies this Gemara is featured on the side. A trapezoid, or a volcano shape, appears. It represents Shnei Shlavim, Hatza'ah Udechiyasa. There are two stages. There's a suggestion and then a rejection. First stage, Leima Beplukta. The first stage is to suggest that the Tanakama and Rabbi Nosson parallel a machlokas between the Chachomim and Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah. And the second stage, which we'll see on the third line from the top of Amid Beis, where it says, no, everyone, that means the Tanakama and Rabbi Nosson, agree with the opinion of Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah. So within their agreeing with him, what then is the controversy between the Tanakama, the first opinion, and Rabbi Nosson? So now the Gemara. Lema beplukto de Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah v'Rabbanon komifligi. Disnan. Now we present the Machlokas Tanoim. Nisarmalo or Nisgarsha. Take note of, here we're dealing with the husband dies. In the source that we are trying to analyze, the Tanakam Reb Nosson, there it spoke about the woman, the wife dying. Here the husband dies. Bein min ha-nisuin, bein min ha-erusin, and note the dashed underlining is very significant. The husband died either from the erusin, from the nisuin stage, or even in a case he died from the erusin stage, it's the earlier stage of the marriage. Goiva es hakoil, he is entitled to collect everything that appears in the ksuba. Rabbi Ozer ben Azariah Omer min hanesuin goyves hakol. If the death is after they consummated their marriage, then he's entitled to collect everything. We made an error. We're talking about the woman collecting. We emphasized before that we're talking here about the man dying. So the Tanakama says that when she becomes a widow, whether it's from the Nisuin stage or even from the Erusin stage, the lady is now a widow. She collects everything that's in the Ksuba. Rabbi Ozer ben Azariah Omer, min hanesuin goyves hakol. If he, the husband, died after they consummated their marriage, then she, the wife, the widow, collects everything. Min ho'erusin, if he died from the early stage of the marriage, then besula goyve mosayim v'almona mona. Then the virgin will collect the 200, and if she happened to be a widow previously, and this was a second marriage for her, she'll collect the 100. We continuing at the top of Omid Beis, Shelo kosav lo elo almanas lekonsa. The husband who had written in extra amounts for his wife, for her to receive upon his death, he wrote it only with the condition that he would have already consummated their marriage. Konsa, to take her in, whereas that idea of konsa applies only after Nisuin, not at the Erusin stage. So now we have two Tanaic sources, and we want to superimpose one on the other. Laman diomar lo zacha, according to the opinion in the first source, the Tanakama, that says that when she dies, the husband is not entitled to those items from the point of Erusin. That's Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. That would parallel his opinion that from the point of Erusin, you see, things are highly limited. And Uman de Omar Zacha, that would be Rebbe Nasan, who says that in his case where the woman died, the husband is entitled even from Erusin to all of the things that were assigned. That would then parallel the opinion of the Rabbonim. Okay, Mandomar Zocha Kirabbonon. That would be like the Rabbonon, the Tanakama that appeared before Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah, the first opinion in that particular source. The Gemara's response to this suggestion is no, we're not going to say, like you just said, to set up the Tanakama of Reb Nasan like Reb Ozer ben Azariah and Rebbe Nasan like the Rabbonon. The Rabbonon is the opinion, the Tanakama, that appeared before Reb Ozer ben Azariah in that source. Rather, the Kule Alma Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah. That means that the Tanakama and Rebbe Nasan in that particular source, they both agree with Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah. So, Mandi Omar lo Zocha, the Tanakama of Rebbe Nasan, who said that the husband is not entitled when she dies, so the husband is not entitled. To Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah, that's straightforward, like Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah, that says that during the Erusin time, so the rights of each one to the Ksuba are limited. Uman diomar Zocha, Rebbe Nasan, who said that when the wife dies, when the wife dies from Erusin, the husband is entitled. Ad kan lo ka'omer Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah, Rebbe Ozer ben Azariah, who spoke about a limitation at the early stage of Erusin, that's elo mididei ledidah. That's only with regard to things that the husband is adding to the ksuba. We should have maybe pointed out earlier that you have, on the one hand, a father adding things to the ksuba, the dowry that he assigns to his daughter when she goes into marriage, and we have the husband who also has a basic 200 zuz obligation in a psula marriage, and then he may add things, and that was what the source was referring to when it said goyves hakol in the second source. So Rebbe Nasan, who when speaking about the woman dying, saying that the woman who dies from Erusin, the husband is entitled to everything, that and that Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, that Rebbe Nosson would agree with Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, who spoke about a limitation. So the Gemara explains that Ad kan lo kum Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. Until now, Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah speaks about limitation ela mididei l'didah. That's with regard to things that the husband adds to the basic ksuba in anticipation of giving over to his wife. Shelo kosav lo elo almanas lekon. So when a husband writes, he inflates or expands, enlarges the ksuba. That is because he's doing so with the anticipation of it being, let's say, eventually received by a woman that he was machnis, with whom he consummated the marriage. He had never had intentions for a woman that he didn't have physical contact with, namely from the early Erusin stage. He never had intentions for her to receive that. Avol mididol l'didei, when it comes from items coming from her side, her father assigning to the girl in her marriage to bring in to the husband. Afilu Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah moidi, even Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah will concede, even he that had this limitation approach to the Erusin period, he will agree that the father was willing to have that husband receive things from the early stage, de mishum ichtuni hu. The purpose was to see to it that the daughter would enter a state of marriage, regardless of early stage, later stage, if she becomes a married person. V'ha ichtani lahu, and that was achieved at the Erusin stage. That you can say that at least he had the satisfaction of knowing that his daughter was considered married to a man. And with that feeling alone, that's enough to motivate the properties from her side being transferred to the husband, even though she died prior to the nisuin. Chayev b'mezonoseha. A husband is obligated to support his wife, to provide food for his wife. On the side, we have a nosei klali, a general topic heading. Machlokes Tanoim. Behemshech ha'omid, we'll see later on this omid a Tanei controversy. Im mezonos v'chulei, if different things that a husband is obligated in to provide to his wife, is it a takonas chachamim or odoraisa? Is it rabbinic or is it a Torah-based obligation? The immediate topic heading, the nosei, Tiknu choyvos lebal tmuras hatovos shemekabel mishto. There are established, assuming of course you're dealing with rabbinic obligations, that these obligations are on a rabbinic level. So then we can say that the rabbis established various husband obligations toward his wife in exchange for various benefits that he receives from her. Again, you see that the Chazal are on a very down-to-earth level, as we elaborated on before, that as wonderful an idea as marriage is, and how it often is portrayed as an emotional bonding of love between two, there is more to it than that. There is the financial, the business aspect of things. There is a give and take element that is on a financial level, and it's obvious, I'm sure, to everyone listening how realistic that is. And we, the Chazal, as we're learning the Shas, are all too well aware of that, and things are spelled out in clear terms ahead of time. No surprises should arise if you're following the Chazal, the Torah method. Things are spelled out clearly. So we continue with the Gemara. Tonu Rabbanan tiknu mezonoseo tachas ma'isi yodeha ukfurasa tachas kesubasa. They established the obligation of a husband to provide food support to his wife. In exchange, tachas means in exchange for that any income she produces is transferred to the husband. Ukfurasa, and the obligation of a husband to bury his wife in the event that, of course, she dies before he does. So he has to see to it, he has to pay for all the expenditures in her burial. That is in exchange, tachas ksubasa, in exchange for the various items that we call the nidunya, the dowry that she brought in to the marriage from her side of things, from her father's house. Lefikoch baal ochel peros. There's a phrase that is kind of disjointed. It says, and therefore the husband consumes the fruits of her properties. Peros mandikashmai. Who made any mention in this source about peros? Chisurei mechasr v'hachikotani. We realize that the source we just read was a bit abbreviated. Chisur Mesra was abbreviated, and rather this is the way it is to be understood. Tiknu Mizonos Tachas Maisiodeo, that we already saw, and Pirkona, Pirkona is redemption from captivity. Tachas Peros, and here you see the reference to Peros that we were looking for before, that the husband is obligated in the event that his wife is taken captive, he has to redeem her. He has to pay for her redemption, or ransom. And that is in exchange for the fact that he, the husband, benefits from the fruits of the profits from properties that she brings into the marriage. Ukfurasa tachas ksubasa. This we saw before, the obligation of the husband to bury the wife in the event she dies before him. He has to pay for a burial in exchange for the fact that he receives the nidunya, the ksuba. Those are the items that were written into the ksuba in her marriage to him. Lefikach baal ochel peros. My lefikach, the Gemara wants to know, what is the idea here of the therefore that was stated in this source? In other words, we redid the original source to show that there's the presence of peros in the source, which is benefit that he receives from her properties in exchange for his obligation to redeem her. So the Gemara explains, Mahu de Tema, the word lefikach indicates there's some causality here. So one would have thought, without this being spelled out, Mahu de Tema mecha lo nichlinhu. Maybe it would have been better for the husband not to consume the profits from properties that she brings into the marriage. Anuchi nan chinhu. Let us leave them aside. De'im kain, if the husband will consume the fruits, the profits from those properties, mim navalo parak, in the event that she's taken captive, he'll withhold himself, and he won't redeem her, he won't ransom her. Komash malon daho adifa. So what the source is telling us, that this plan, this method is better. In other words, we should officially establish a relationship between his benefit of the peros in exchange for his obligation to redeem her. Zinin delo molo. There are times, and this we mentioned before in the Rashi with regard to father and daughter, it's the same thing over here. Sometimes the profits that her fields, her properties produced are in fact not sufficient they don't cover the amount that they're demanding for her ransom. And since we have established as a rule that husband benefits from profits regardless of how much the profit is from her properties, he is to benefit from that. So that is a benefit that he receives in exchange for his redeeming her, regardless of the ransom. When I say regardless of the ransom amount, it means that even if the ransom amount is in fact more than he was profiting from her properties, nevertheless, the takona, the rule says that you're entitled to profit from her properties, whatever the amount is. And hence, he will redeem her whatever the amount is, even if it exceeds the amount that he profited from her properties. Let's take a look at the Rashi. A little more than halfway down the Rashi commentary. Delo malu lo yehe beperos kedei pirkona. It might be that there isn't enough value in the profits that he received from her fruits, from her profits, her property profits that he benefited from. It might not be enough kedei pirkona, enough to redeem her with. V'hashta ki achlinu. Now that he benefits from it, v'lo yadia kama have, v'lo yadia kama have porek lo midilei. When he consumes it and doesn't know how much there was, he will redeem her from his own resources. That is in fact what we have established, that he will benefit, he's entitled to benefit, bein rav, bein ma'at, whether it's a lot, whether it's a little, v'hu porek kol kamadavin, he'll pay the ransom, whatever the amount is. The Gemara continues with a suggestion, v'epuch ano. Why? Let us switch around in terms of the way we set up the relationship between benefits and obligations. Let us switch around the way we set things up, namely the mizonos, the support for her by way of food support the husband is obligated to provide. That is in exchange for peiros, the profits from properties that she brings into the marriage, and the obligation of redeeming her from captivity. That's in exchange for the maisa yodel, for her income from work she does. So why is it not set up like that? Omar Abaye explains, Tiknu motsui lemotsui v'sheno motsui l'sheno motsui. The way things were established, and you might want to use a type of mnemonic or a memory device. It's more of an audio type device. The sounds of the letters mem, mizonos, mem is mizonos begins with a mem, maisa yodea, mem also is beginning of the word maisa yodea. And we saw peiros and pirkona, both beginning with a pei. So that helps to, and likewise with regard to the ksuba and kvura. There it's a kuf and a chaf, but the same initial sound with regard to both words, the way we pronounce it at least, kvura and ksuba. So Rabbi explains that the mizonos maisiodea relationship and the pirkona peiros relationship is that which is common is in exchange for that which is common. It's common for women to produce income through work, through efforts, maisiodayim, and it's common, of course, on a daily basis. A person needs food, so that the obligation for a husband to provide food is in exchange for which is a common need, which is a frequent need, is in exchange for that which is common, namely the work income that the wife produces. That which is uncommon, the need for, or the obligation of him to redeem her from captivity. How often are wives of husbands taken into captivity? It's kind of an unusual thing, so he's obligated to redeem her in exchange for something that itself is rather uncommon, that a woman brings into a marriage properties that produce profits. That's, relatively speaking, uncommon, and hence the one in exchange for the other. Omar Rava, Hai Tana Sovar Mizoinois Midoraisa. The following Tanaic source holds that the husband's obligation to provide food support, to provide nutritional support to his wife, is an obligation that exists already from the Torah. On the side, we have a nosei, a machlokas tanoim. The pasuk makes reference to a a type of marriage, and I don't want to get into the background of what the Torah is describing there, but it's describing a situation of a marriage, and it says in the pasuk that sheirah kusasa ve'onasa, these three things that we're not going to translate immediately, these three things, sheirah kusasa ve'onasa lo yigra, he shall not deprive her of those things, he shall not deprive his wife of those things. Up till now, you see we have a little arrow to the immediate right-hand side of the Gemara, and there's some dashed underlining. Up till now, we've presented these things, mizonos, as something tiknu mizonos. So that means the rabbis established a husband's obligation to support his wife. So that indicates something rabbinic. Rava is telling, we have another opinion, another Tanaic opinion that says it's not something the rabbis established, but rather the Torah obligates a husband to provide food for his wife. Now we continue. Desanya. Sheira, we're again referring to the pasuk Sheira Ksusa V'Yoinasa, three words, Sheira Elu Mizonos, that's a reference to food. V'cheinu Omer, V'asher Ochlu She'er Ami. So you see the word She'er in the context of Ochlu, of food. Ksusa, Kemashma'o, the word Ksusa is as it sounds, its general meaning is clothing. And Oinasa, Zu Oina. This is a reference to intimacy, to conjugal relations that a husband is obligated to provide to his wife. You see the word ta'aneh similar to the word ona, and it's in reference to there. In case it was a reference to Lavan and Yankov, and Lavan referring to his daughters Rachel and Leah. That Lavan was talking to his son-in-law Yankov Avinu, about his concern that his daughters, let us say, receive the proper attention in this area. Rabbi Ozer Omer She'era Zu Ona. Rabbi Ozer says the word She'era is a reference to the issue of intimacy that a husband must provide. B'cheinu Omer Ish El Kol She'er Besoro Lo Sikrivu Legalos Erva. The pasuk is dealing with the prohibition of intimacy with those forbidden relatives. So you see in the context of intimacy the word She'er appearing. Ksusa Kemashmo, here they both agree that the word Ksusa is a reference to clothing. Oinasa Elu Mizonos, and Ona is a reference to the food obligation. V'cheinu Omer Vayancha Vayar Ivecha, and that pasuk is in the context of food, a reference to how the Almighty provided food for the Jews during their sojourn in the wilderness. But you see the word Vayancha like the word Ona in the context of food. The Tanaic source continues at the top of Mem Ches Amud Aleph. We turn to Mem Ches Amud Aleph. Rabbi Ozer ben Yankov Omer She'era Ksusa. You see that. Note the double underlining that we have over here. Rabbi Ozer ben Azariah is going to deal with these words, but he darshans the words in pairs. She'era Ksusa, and then a few lines later he starts with the middle word Ksusa and continues Ksusa Va'inasa. So now Rebbe Ozer ben Omer She'era Ksusa Lefum She'era, according to her age, Tain Ksusa, provide clothing for her. Shelo Yitain Law Lo Shel Yalda Lizakena. One should not give clothing that are worn by the youthful, by the young, to a wife who is elderly. Rashi gets into the descriptions of it, but they're different. Rashi says that the clothing of young women was broad, was wide, and there was more fabric, was heavier. And don't give that kind of wardrobe to a wife that's a zakena, that's older. It's hard for her to wear such clothing. For those shel zakena liyalda, and likewise, don't give to a yalda, to a young wife, clothing that are characteristic of older women. Ksusa v'oinasa, lefum oinasa tein ksusa. Not only in terms of age must a husband take into consideration, but also in terms of clothing are also dependent on the season. Shelo yitain chadoshim b'mois hachama, v'lo shchokim b'mois hagshomim. In the Yemos HaChama, that's the hot season, a person should not provide clothing that are thick. It's again that would insulate the individual during the hot season. New clothing are warmer than worn clothing. So that don't give new tight clothing to your wife during the hot season, and don't give worn out clothing, which are thinner and less insulatory than new clothing. Don't give the shchokim, the worn out type clothing, in the cold, the rainy season, the cold season, when she needs the heat. So Rabbi Ozer ben Azariah, as we just saw, darshans the same pasuk with a different twist to it. We continue. Tony Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef states a Tanaic source, again focusing on the word from the pasuk she'era, zu kiruv basar. She'era, this is a reference to intimacy. And in fact, we saw Rabbi Ozer said that she'era zu ono. We saw this 3 lines from the bottom of Mem Zayin Mem Beis. Rav Yosef would seem to go in the same direction, that she'era has to do with intimacy. Kiruv basar is a reference to intimacy. Shelo yinag bo minag parsayim, that a husband should not behave in the way of the Persians. Shemishamshin mitoseim biluvushein. They engage in physical contact, in intimacy, in conjugal relations while fully clothed. And that's not the way. That's not the Torah way. Messiah le Rav Huna. This source supports Rav Huna's approach. Yom Rav Huna. Ha'omer, a man who declares, I efshi elo ani bevigdi vehi bevigda, I cannot engage in intimacy with my wife other than if I am clothed and she is clothed. If a husband makes such a declaration, yotzi v'noseng suba, that's grounds for divorce, for him divorcing her and paying her that which is due to her in the ksuba.